As part of our system of color management, we need to ensure that Photoshop's color settings are correctly set to try and preserve as much color information, tonal information throughout the digital workflow. So that's what I'll show you how to do now. So if we go to Photoshop, open it up, and we've opened it up without any images being open as well. So we need to do that so that it applies to, it's the default setting for Photoshop. If we had an image open, then it would just apply to that single image. So we need to go to Edit and Color Settings, and that brings up this dialog box here. Now these are the settings that you would normally find if you haven't changed anything. They're the default settings that Photoshop usually comes with, and you can see that the setting is called North American General Purpose, and within that General Purpose preset we have the working space, we have management policies, profile mismatches, and a few other settings here. So all of those settings are determined by that preset. Now this is not the ideal working environment for serious photography, so we need to change some of these settings, and I'll run through each one of these in turn. But the first thing we need to do to change some of these settings in a way that we prefer is to go to the drop down here and select Europe Prepress 3. Now if you're using an older version of Photoshop, you may only have Europe Prepress 2, so select that instead. So I'll select that, and by selecting that, quite a few of these other settings changed as well, settings that we will like to retain. The working space, as I've indicated, we have sRGB, which is the smallest color space, Adobe 1998, which is a fairly good one and was recommended as the best until a few years ago, and then we have ProPhoto RGB. So that's the one I prefer to work with. It's the largest color space normally available, and in previous versions of Photoshop it would have appeared at the top, but now it's gone down here in alphabetical order. So I'm looking for ProPhoto RGB. There it is there. So there we have the working space, the RGB working space set. These other ones are applicable for if you're working with CMYK images, which isn't normally the case for the standard photographer. If you're working creating books, then you may need to address the CMYK entry there. Color management policies. Now if you've already worked on images, they will already have embedded, hopefully, a color profile, sRGB, Adobe 1998 or ProPhoto RGB. So when you bring it into Photoshop, you don't want it to automatically change the color space, because it will affect the overall color balance of the image. So it's best down here to have RGB, which is the main space for digital images, preserve embedded profiles. So if it comes in with a profile embedded, it honors that profile, so it won't change it. So that's what we want. CMYK again, if you're using that sort of image, again, preserve embedded profiles. So all preserve embedded profiles. Down here we have profile mismatches. Now the way we've set this up, we're saying preserve the embedded profiles. So we don't want to be told every single time that that embedded profile is not a match to ProPhoto RGB. So I untick these, and the same again with when pasting, because I don't want to know every time. I've produced these settings so that that's how it works. Profile mismatches. Now that is a different issue. If we get an image that hasn't got a profile attached, then we need to know about it so that we can physically attach a correct profile. Okay, so you should not normally have this situation, but if you get an image from somebody else who doesn't color manage, you may need to try and assign a correct profile for their image so it renders correctly. So I need to know that, so I'll leave that tick there. All of these other settings you can just leave as is. Okay, there's one little thing here. You've got unsynchronized. If you've got a load of different Adobe products, you may wish to synchronize the color settings that we're setting here across all of your Adobe products. So, and you do that through Bridge. But that's just checking, that's just telling you that so far you haven't synchronized the settings. So I'm happy with those settings, and you'll notice that the settings has gone to custom. Now we want to save what we've done here as a new preset, and we can go to save, and that brings up this menu here, and you can see that I've already saved some of my own specific profiles for different types of work, but I'm going to call this Pro Photo RGB and save that. Now it comes up with a description in here. We can just click OK, and in here we can now see that that setting is Pro Photo, and it should appear. There we go. So if we were to later change, say we wanted to create a book and we wanted a profile like this, it changes to sRGB, blurb, profile. Having done all the work, we can then go back to here, and there's Pro Photo. So it changes everything back to the way we want to work. We can say OK, and that is how we set up the color settings in Photoshop, so that it's any new image that comes into Photoshop will have those settings applied, and any images that have already been worked on, it will honor the color settings that came in with the image without altering them.